Hello, everyone. Pete Byrne, WSBT-22 Sports, alongside Tyler James of blueandgold.com. And Tyler, we just got done talking to Marcus Freeman as Notre Dame prepares to play its home opener this Saturday under the lights against Texas A&M. A lot more of the conversation today centered around what we saw a little less than 2 weeks ago down in Miami, as the Irish obviously have a lot of areas that they're trying to clean up. What are some of the things you took away from his press conference today?
Yeah, I think one of my biggest things was wanting to know, how are they evaluating that first game and how much of it is a concern versus what the Miami presented against them, and how much of it is a concern against, do we not understand our team well enough? And Marcus Freeman seemed to be pretty in favor of, we didn't play well, but that's not necessarily defining who this team is. That they're not necessarily going to go out and make a bunch of personnel changes after the first game or change the way that they want to play football. They just need to do it better, clearly. And so I think that was the biggest takeaway. Good news, no real new injuries of note. They treated the bye week as more of a normal week in terms of needing to be physical. It's early in the season, so it's not like you're worn out yet. And I think the way Notre Dame played indicated that they needed to be more physical going into this next game against Texas A&M. So I think those are probably my biggest takeaways of today's press conference with Marcus Freeman.
Yeah, one thing I noticed that he kept going back to over and over again was execution or a lack thereof. I don't think that they feel that the game plan was necessarily lacking as much as that the fact that guys were sometimes in position to make plays and just didn't do that. Not something we saw that often last year. It was a pretty sound team. So obviously that's something they work on. One thing he did say, though, is that he continued to put the execution problems on the coaches, not the players, even though the players are the ones that have to make those plays.
Right, yeah. Notre Dame needs to figure out how to better prepare those guys. It seemed like in some situations they weren't prepared for what they need to be doing. And even to my surprise, and I think to most people's surprise, probably even the coaching staff surprise, a lot of those guys were captains, I felt. Like some of the guys that didn't play particularly well, like a Drake Bowen or Emil Wagner, guys are captains who played extremely well last season and did not play up to their performance. And so Notre Dame has to figure out how to get those guys better prepared, put them in better positions to succeed. At least for Emil Wagner, at least Ruben Bain isn't going to be lining up against him in a Texas A&M uniform.
Yeah, no question that will help. I mean, and part of what I think we're all curious to wonder is just how good is Miami versus how not prepared might the Irish have been for last Sunday. As we look ahead to the next game, I mean, I think one thing people are really, concerned about is the way the defensive game plan looked. And it's because, quite honestly, Irish fans have been spoiled under Al Golden the last couple of years. There's a new defensive coordinator in Chris Ash. And Marcus Freeman had some interesting thoughts on just the fact that it's going to take some time for the players to fully grasp the system, and for Chris Ash, I think, to fully grasp what his players are capable of.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who are comparing Chris Ash to Al Golden are maybe not remembering how Al Golden's tenure started at Notre Dame. It took him some time to get used to some things. The defense wasn't pressuring Ohio State in his first game as a defensive coordinator. So Chris Ash needs to figure out his own personnel, figure out how to better use them and put them in better positions to succeed. And maybe I thought the defense played a little passively and maybe let Miami dictate the tone of the game on that side of the ball. And so I think they got to address that, figure that out. And Chris Ash is the guy who's got to sort of pick and choose his places to do that, because he could also be too aggressive and then everyone wants to fire him as well. So I think there's a balance he's got to deal with. And I think being that Marcus Freeman is the head coach, a former defensive coordinator himself, I think there should be some faith that they'll be able to get that figured out.
There's a learning curve that the players are understandably going under with a new defensive coordinator. Marcus Freeman talked about it to a point today, saying he thought a lot of times his guys weren't playing with the kind of velocity that they needed to make the kind of plays that they need them to make. Guys usually play slower when they are thinking, right? And so how much can you fast-track that? And because you can't always fast-track it, did the bye come maybe at a good time?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way to fast track it is maybe to eliminate some of the things that they're thinking about. Just say, hey, okay, I know we talked about
simplify.
Yeah, simplify some of the things, and maybe there's an uneasiness of like, well, how is Chris Ash going to respond? If I'm a player, how is Chris Ash going to respond to me doing this versus how Al Golden responded to me doing this? And there's everyone's feeling each other out still in a game situation. So I think there's a way to fast track that, especially because so many of the guys that I think didn't play well are capable of so much more than they showed against Miami. And so I think a lot of it, build confidence back within those guys. When you're confident, you're going to play fast, and I think that's something that Notre Dame can really work on.
We didn't talk nearly as much about offense today with Coach Freeman as we did the defense, I don't feel like. But as you look at the matchup with Texas A&M, a team that their run defense hasn't been overly stout the first two games of the year against lesser competition, in my opinion, certainly. And Jeremiah Love not coming off of the kind of game that people were hoping for. I mean, how imperative is it that we see him carry the ball and effectively this Saturday?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely going to be a big part of the game plan for Notre Dame. Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price as well. Price had some success against Miami, then fumbled the ball and didn't get many opportunities after that. So I think the running game is a real opportunity for Notre Dame against this Texas A&M defense. I think Texas A&M can get after the quarterback, maybe not as well as Miami, but similarly. So I think to keep those guys on their heels a little bit, you got to be able to run the ball and sort of dictate that with the offensive line. And so I would expect we maybe see less of those screens early on to settle C.J. Carr in, and maybe try to settle the offensive line in with some running plays and get them to build some momentum.
C.J. Carr did play quite well, by the way, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I think maybe to a point where Notre Dame was maybe too cautious, although you could say the opposite, that the way they sort of allowed him to get into the game maybe led him to being what he was later in the game. So I think seeing how he handled that maybe can change what Notre Dame does with him moving forward and the confidence it has in him, especially obviously they supported him and wanted to be quarterback one, but the quarterback competition was real and there was a chance he wasn't going to be that. So I think for him to go out and play like he did against Miami is something that Notre Dame can really build upon.
All right, so we finally get a chance to see the Irish here in the home stadium, and all the fans will be here. People have been looking forward to this for a long time. The last time we saw the Irish play in here, it was one of the most electric atmospheres that I can remember, the playoff game against Indiana. The loss to Miami takes a little bit of the luster off of that. Nonetheless, this is a top 20 matchup under the lights at Notre Dame Stadium. And again, the last time most fans saw them was before that national championship run. So what kind of atmosphere should we expect this Saturday?
I'd like to think it'll be a pretty raucous atmosphere. I mean, you're playing against an A&M team who had a loud crowd of its own when Notre Dame went down to A&M, so I think it's time for Notre Dame fans to return the favor there. I know there's probably some concerns, especially if the game starts a little slow, like, oh no, here we go again for Notre Dame fans, but I think there's probably more confidence than that, and especially for the people who will show up in the stadium. So I would expect there to be a loud crowd and Notre Dame fans to show this team support and try to inspire and be a part of a winning effort for Notre Dame, which they obviously weren't able to do at the same level down in Miami.
Sure, and I don't think a slow start needs to be alarming. If you recall last year's game against Texas A&M, I thought that was a slow start too. New quarterback, tough environment. I mean, this is a top 20 team. I don't think you would just expect that Notre Dame's going to take the field and roll them by 30. This is going to be a hard football game. Nonetheless, an atmosphere we're certainly looking forward to. And we're going to have a lot more throughout the rest of the week to get the fans ready, both on WSBT and WSBT.com, and certainly Tyler and his crew on blueandgold.com. And the Irish and Texas A&M will play in the home opener for the Fighting Irish this Saturday night under the lights at 7:30. Thanks for joining us. I'm Pete Byrne from WSBT-22 News. For more Notre Dame stories, like and subscribe to the WSBT-22 YouTube page. Thanks for watching.